meeting. Just a quick reminder, so it is being live streamed, and we do have some people, well, one member online. So if we can just use the microphones and speak directly into them. So the first item on the agenda is election of chair and vice chair. So we'll deal with the chair first. Do we have any nominations for chair, please?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Mr. Bowman.
Have a seconder for that? Accept the nomination. Any other nominations? All in favour of Andy Bowman being elected chair? Unanimous for the can vote. Please come and pick your special seat. Yes, you can bang the gavel. So I'll continue with the end of this item for election of vice chair. I know Helen Pennock online has expressed interest. Do we have anyone else who is interested in being vice chair?
In which case, may I nominate Helen Pennock?
Lovely. Do we have a seconder? Lovely. Helen, do you accept the nomination, just to confirm?
Yes, thank you.
No more nominations? If so, all in favour, please. Lovely. You may not have been able to see that, but you were elected vice chair, Helen. Congratulations. I'll hand back to the new chair.
We have a few new members, so welcome to them. And I'd also like to welcome Steve, who is the chair of the investment committee, who's sat here observer to see what we do. He's sitting on what he does. Any apologies?
So I will under chair if in due course we make introductions.
Sorry, yes. Should we do that now?
Yeah.
Right. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Andy Bowman. I've been a scheme member representative for a few years on this. I think I was one of the original members of the pension board, so I have some experience.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Thompson, fund officer and support the pension board and report to Mark Gaylor on the investment team.
Morning, I'm Matt Fulp, Deputy Director of Finance and Public Value here at Devon County Council.
Hi everyone, I'm Alistair McIntosh. I'm a member rep, been on for a year. So good to see everyone.
I'm Councillor Steve Keeble for Creedy, Tor and Midex, which means nothing to anybody really, because it's 29 parishes right in the middle of Devon between Wenworthy and Silverton. And I am a former employee of DCC, so I know the pension side. I probably need to mention that under the declaration of this.
I'm Steve Lodge. I'm County Councillor for Tiverton West, and I'm also chair of the Investment Pensions Committee.
Good morning, Gareth Shackler, Employer and Communications Manager for Peninsula Pensions. Here, providing an update on.
Morning, everybody. It's Rachel Lamb, and I head up Peninsula Pensions, the administration team.
Hi, my name is Rob Jeans. I'm the independent representative. I worked for Barclays for 30 years. I've been on the board for the last 4 years.
Very good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Arrow. I am a pensioner now for being paid a pension by Devon County Council, but that is as a result of being the senior coroner for Plymouth, Torbay and South Devon for a number of years. I've been on the board for 3 years now. Thank you.
Hello, morning. It's Dominic Walsh. I'm the employee representative. I work for an admitted body, so I come in from an admitted body angle, and I think I've been on the board for the best part of 4 years now. Time flies.
Fred Whitehouse, Clerk.
And I also add that Carl Hearn, who was previously on the board, has moved to another place, i.e. he's resigned his seat here and he has now gone to the investment committee representing the various trusts and councils and things. And I see Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks everyone. Sorry I can't be with you in person this morning. So my name's Helen Pennack. I'm a fund member and I've been on the board for about a year now.
And Will?
Will doesn't need to introduce himself. He's just live streaming this meeting.
Okay, right. Thank you. I'm just reading the screen. I'm not used to this one. Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm not aware of any chair's announcements. No. Apologies.
No apologies received, but also we do have one member attending remotely.
Okay. Declaration of interest. We all have the joy of having to fill those in every once a year. So if you haven't, please do. And as we say, if you have an interest in a item, please declare. Doesn't normally happen, but don't worry.
And I think just because I've worked for the County Council as a senior manager within education and children's services for 32 years, that I'm in receipt of a Devon County Council a pension. I've spoken to the monitoring officer and there is a dispensation, but I think I'd just like that to be noted at this meeting.
It's fine, I'll note that in the minutes.
So just for completeness, I have an interest in the detail of the McLeod scheme.
Minutes of the meeting, item 5 of the 3rd of April 25. Are you happy with the minutes? Any issues arising from it which are not on the current agenda? No. So can I take it that I can sign those? Everybody happy?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Next item, review of attendance. Charlotte.
It was urgent items. Just
Sorry.
to make sure there's no.
I don't think there's any urgent items. No, sorry, no. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. So the review of attendance, for those new on the board, I bring this report to each board meeting for the board to review. It shows the rolling history of attendance over the last 4 board meetings and the last 4 training sessions. The terms of reference of the board state that membership of the board will be reviewed if a member misses more than 2 consecutive board or training sessions. The attendance at meetings and training sessions are included in the fund's annual report and accounts. So if I've got anything wrong, let me know. And also if you attend other trainings such as online webinars or courses, etc., let me know, and this can be logged against your training record. Thank you.
Has anybody got anything they would like to add? Dominic.
Yeah, at the last meeting, it was noted that normally we have a really good sort of nearly 100% attendance at everything, but the Brunel Investor Day let us down last year because of location. And I asked at the last meeting, did we know the location of the next meeting? Was it going to be a bit more local, or rather, would there be an online possibility so we don't miss the Investor Day?
My understanding is, I'm not sure that the location, but that it will be online. So I don't think there should be an issue, hopefully this year.
Thank you.
Have we a date for that at all? Yeah. Sorry, keep forgetting that one. Get it in a minute. Right. Employer performance monitoring. Rachel or Charlotte?
I'll start and then I'll hand over to Gareth. So this report focuses on how employers in the fund are performing in keeping up to date with their duties. The first section looks at the timeliness of monthly pension contributions. There is a legal requirement for contributions to be received by the 21st of the month after the monthly employee contributions were deducted from pay. So officers and the board have a duty to inform the pensions regulator if they consider that a material breach has occurred, and hence I produced this report for the board. Good news is the number of late contributions were the lowest I can recall for this quarter, reporting to the end of March 2025, which is pleasing to see. So before I hand over to Gareth, has anybody got any questions on the contribution monitoring side?
Yeah, no, well done with the improvement. Is there any particular reason you think it's kind of the best figures you've seen?
Well, I do wonder if I have to praise my colleagues in Peninsula Pensions, because as we know that they've been starting to bash the employers around the ears, and I think it's working.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Yes. So the next area here focuses, as you pointed out a moment ago, more on the administrative side rather than the investment. Looks at a number of areas, and I'll go through some graphs in a minute with you, but in principle, Appendix 1 of this report, which we'll go to in a moment, gives an overview of the number of leaver notifications received for the sort of last quarter, and also the type of leaver as well. If I flip to Appendix 2 now for you, so going on to page 15, a couple of pages there, you will see the vast majority of leavers from the scheme come under, about 83% are leaving the scheme rather than retiring. So that's leaving under 2 years service, or just generally leaving before or after age 55. That's fairly flat, to be fair, 2,276 leavers. And again, it's broadly in line with where we've seen for the whole financial year. To sort of put a bit of context on that, we have also had just under 2,150 joiners. So again, although it sounds like a large number, it's broadly in line with the starters as well. If I take you through to Appendix 2, so then the next slide, this then highlights the time to notify. So for those that haven't seen this before, it's essentially how long it takes an employer to tell us somebody has left. You will see that the bulk of cases, again, fall into the sort of under 30 days period. There are some that are over 30 days. That can be a combination of factors. The first being the timing of a pay run. So if somebody was to leave and that sort of missed a pay run, that can delay it. But secondly, as Charlie alluded to, we have been engaging employers a lot more proactively around closing some of these older cases out. So it's not a surprise that some of those are reflected in here as being greater than 30 or 60 days, in fact, for notification. I'd expect that to probably carry on for the next couple of quarters while we tidy up those last of the older cases as well. You'll then see the last bit on Appendix 2, just creeping onto the next page, is just highlighting, as requested, some of the priority areas. So those areas of interest around death in service, ill health, flexible retirement, and then normal or late retirements. Again, pleasing that the average times for all of those are within what you sort of deem an acceptable level. Nothing stands out there. A couple of outliers, see for normal or late retirements. As I say, that will likely be because we're chasing up a number of those old cases that can go back a fair time. The last appendix on this, so creeping onto the next page, Appendix 3, is a bit of new data that we've started providing, and that shows you the number of joiners per month in this situation. Again, welcome feedback on that, but in principle, it just shows, as I say, about 2,150 in the first quarter. So there or thereabouts, aligning with the number of leavers as well. Any questions on any of that data?
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Can I just ask, in terms of the opted out, both the pie charts, the opted out of the scheme, do you know what the breakdown is? Is that people simply no longer contributing, or is that they've transferred out? Because obviously I know there's quite significant issues, aren't there, if you transfer out of a kind of local authority based scheme. And yeah, could you just shed a bit more light on that,
yes, yes. So as I understand it, this data is purely those that have opted out, so they've decided to leave the scheme, but still be employed in whatever role it was they were in.
Okay.
Just no longer.
So they haven't necessarily transferred their fund out, that they've just stopped contributing. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, are there any figures for? Sorry, maybe it's a separate.
That's
for
okay.
Transferring.
Not specifically in here. This focuses on the reason they've left rather than what they ultimately did.
Okay.
With it. The transfers is reflected a little bit later on, although again, in the next performance report, page 90, so it's a few agenda items further down.
Yeah.
But again, that won't be broken down specifically for opt-outs. It just shows you a reflection of the number of transfer cases that are going to be taken.
Just to follow up there, Alistair, I think might be useful because those figures might be masked by obviously there's auto enrolment. So one assumes that once auto enrolment kicks in, somebody might start working for us, but opt out very, very quickly. So they haven't necessarily accrued any pension or made contributions. So we're effectively never part of the scheme, but because of auto enrolment are part of the scheme, but then have opted out. Might be worth just seeing what those sorts of numbers are, because I suspect they'll be quite large.
Let me take that away and see what we can get from the data in terms of
rather not large, but a large proportion of opt-outs. All right, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Roswell to the meeting. Welcome. And Helen has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Gareth, it was just a quick one really. I suppose it's more for future reports. It would be really helpful to understand the levers and the joiners in the broader context. So what I can't get a sense from this report is this lever rate high year on year, low year on year compared to the total number of people who opt into a contribution? And likewise with starters, I obviously can see the graph month on month, but I can't get a context of, is that an improving trend or is it going in the wrong direction? So I wondered if it's possible to add that in the context of the whole group, if possible.
Yes, certainly that's something we can look at. The starter is very new in terms of reporting, so that from coincidentally January for us, it's all now electronically tasked, and we can see that a lot simpler on the system. So yes is the simple answer. Moving forward, we can have a play with that, see what works by way of a format for you, and that will start to give you a much clearer picture year on year.
I just think the trend is probably more helpful for us to understand. And then the second one, it's a very small category, but you've got a bizarre category in the levers, which is kind of labelled 010921. What does that mean?
Yes, so there are a few in there, and it is specific to the Devon Fund, where the leaver, reason for leaving, which is a mandatory field on the form if you're not familiar when an employer reports that, there's a field in there, reason for leaving. Some of them have defaulted to a date. So we're in the process of understanding what may have caused that. It does principally seem to be related to DCC as an employer, or at least payroll provider. But we're trying to get to the bottom of what might have caused that. So yes, there is a couple of anomalies in there, you quite rightly point out, that have a date rather than a reason. What I'd expect is once we've got to the bottom of that, those dates will drop and the numbers will slightly be corrected for each category that they should have sat in the first instance. But the overall number, 2,200, is the right number. It just might be a slight shifting in those categories once those dates are altered.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you. I have a question for you. Later on, we'll be talking about the pensions bill and what they're in there. I noticed when in reading it that there was an issue about opt-outs, and the government will be requesting information as to why people are opting out. So it might be helpful if we could sort of, I think taking Helen's point here, have a sort of a year on year going back a couple of three years to actually so indicate whether this level is going up, it's going down, because we as a board have a responsibility to try to get to ask the pension fund to retain members, because everyone who opts out is one less contributor to the fund. So I think previously we've asked what actions has been taken by the fund in order to minimise the opt-out in respect of asking the person why, providing them more information. Is there a potential of going down to 50-50, which is an option in our fund, rather than disappear completely?
Answer that one if that's okay. So I was actually going to mention it in the paper that I'm doing in a moment, which is about the consultation paper included about fairness and access to the scheme, but part of that is an element of what is going to be mandatory reporting on opt-outs of scheme members. And there also are recommendations in there that it goes further than that and asks individuals the actual reason that they're opting out. Now, the whether or not that's going to be doable, because that is going to involve every single employer getting that information from scheme members when they choose to opt out. But it is something that we've spoken to our software providers about as well, because it needs to be a new report that's designed and in line with the consultation, and they've read it all themselves and they're on board with it. So there will be a statutory mandatory if it all goes ahead report, which is annual, and it actually will form part of the annual report that is actioned by us, by the pension fund. So there will be, in answer to your question in a long roundabout way, there will be more reporting on it annually, and it will be in line with what the statutory requirements are.
Thank you. Just to get return, my other question was related to what actions do we as a fund take?
Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you. Yes, so when somebody opts out of the scheme, they have to complete a form, and it highlights every single aspect and every benefit that they're actually giving up before they sign the form. So when they sign the form, it mentions, like you referred to there, about 50-50. It refers to ill health benefits that they're giving up, potential future survivor benefits. So it outlines very clearly what they're giving up by opting out of the scheme. So that's one element of it. Another element is that we do engage with the Pay Your Pension Some Attention campaign, which is an annual campaign nationally, which again is encouraging members to be part of the scheme and not to, it highlights the benefits. What we're not allowed to do is give financial advice. So we have to be very, very careful the line that we hold with saying don't opt out because we have to tell them the benefits as opposed to don't opt out, so that they then are very clear on what they can get. But we, as non-financial advisors, we're not allowed to say do not opt out as strongly as that.
Oh, sorry. So in that case, we can say at the bottom, refer you to an independent pensions advisor.
We have that on the bottom of all our emails and on our website
Okay.
with the Money Helper site and the advisors there. Yes.
Right. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions on agenda item 8 report? Oh, Dominic.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from what Helen was saying and what was just discussed there, the statistics there are based on 1 year and 1 quarter. So we look at opt-outs of, let's say, 500. Is that new opt-outs? What would be useful to say who's actually opted out of the scheme as a whole? Because if I just look at this number and look at active users, it's about 1% of active members and about less than 0.5% of total members. And that sounds very small and it's insignificant, even if some legislation's coming in. But I expect the actual total number of genuine opt-outs is going to be a bit larger. And it'd be interesting, following from Helen's point, is that a problem for us? Ours is outside of national averages, and are we doing something in terms of maybe lack of education for potential members, etc.?
Yes, certainly. I think if we take away that ask and have a look at the data we have on hand around opt-outs, I think Rachel alluded to it, it's not statutory. So some of the recording is very much they've opted out. We don't know why. But yes, we can have a look back and see how much data we've got going back to try and give a broad picture. The challenge that may have that springs to mind is that it won't necessarily be easy to pick up those that opt out, auto enroll back in a few years and opt out again without double counting them, which is why, to a sense, it's sometimes easier to look at it in a slightly smaller window because you have less chance of double counting an individual member. But yes, take that on board. I'll have a look and see what we've got and bring that for the next one.
Thank you. I think at 0.5% is not a problem for board. So it'd be just interesting to understand, even if we will have the data on actual total opt-outs, whether they've opted out previously or then again. I think then we can understand if there is an issue. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, we're happy to move on. Item 9, fund member survey. I think this is Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. The board will recall that the fund is an accredited signatory to the UK Stewardship Code 2020. This code sets out high standards for asset owners and asset managers, and the fund annual report is assessed each year in order that we retain that accreditation. Principle 6 of the code states that we need to take into account client and beneficiary needs, and we undertook a member survey, which was 3 years ago. How time flies, and it's time to do it again. So we've brought the proposed survey to the board, and we'll welcome any feedback prior to us taking it to committee in September. Thank you.
Has anyone got any comments? Sorry, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment in the context, I guess, of our previous discussion, really. On page 25, there's a section about awareness and interest, and question 18 and 19 basically talk about awareness of fund policies and investments. I just wondered whether it might be useful to add a question in around communication preferences. So just as a fund member myself, I don't get a lot of communication really on what's happening. That might be more kind of from Peninsula and administration's perspective, but I just wondered if it might be useful for us to understand a bit more about how people want to be communicated to and engaged with on their pensions.
Yep, certainly we can include that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just say I welcome the changes seem to make sense, just developing, clarifying the issues around the different areas of where people either want or don't want investment. Makes sense to me, so I think it's an improvement. Thank you.
Can I ask, how is this going to be distributed? Because I'm aware from previously that we don't have all the electronic addresses of members. We're going to do a mixture, paper and electronic.
I think the vast majority of our members are electronic now. From memory, last time we emailed it out for member self-service, if I remember correctly, but also put it on the website for people to access it that way if they weren't on member self-service. And of course, if anybody requests one in paper format, I'm sure we could oblige.
I was just wondering, if someone requests it, they have to be aware of it. So how are we advertising it to our members?
I would think it will be well, it will be on our website, and as I said, we will put it out through member self-service. So we are probably reliant on the majority of members being on.
But some members you won't hold an email address for some members. Some members conceivably may not be au fait with the website, may not use it. So isn't there a percentage who just expect a letter, won't they? And will you be sending one? How are you gonna know who you need to send a letter to?
I can, so we know who is signed up for member self-service, and therefore we know who's opted out of it. And you're quite right. If people have opted out of member self-service, then they're expecting a postal copy of whatever is sent electronically. So, we can organise. Yeah, we can organise that if we're asked to. At the minute, I think we've had instructions about member self-service, but you're absolutely right. If people have opted out and they ask for postal, then they should get postal.
Sorry, do you know roughly what percentage of people have?
I knew you were going to ask.
Sorry.
I can find the answer by the end of the meeting, but I haven't got it off the top of my head right now, if that's okay.
We need to encourage the members to take part by any means possible available to us. So I think we'll take that on board.
But given, sorry, just to labour the point, given the age profile of members, which conceivably might, won't there be a relatively, I know we don't know, but large, an appreciable percentage who will need a letter?
Yes, there are a reasonable amount that will need a letter. Yes, you're right. And I agree with you. I think they should have a letter to capture everybody.
I think the consensus is that we ask you to take it away and send a letter to those people who do not have electronic access. Any other questions in relation to the details of the survey? No? Okay.
It just
Sorry.
occurs to me, just as an observation, is it feasible to do a free post envelope back? Is that something you can take away, perhaps?
I can certainly look into it.
Right, I think we've looked at that item. Agenda item 10, the pension fund risk register. Again, that's Charlotte to start.
Okay. Thank you. So here is the risk registers for both the fund, i.e. sort of investments and governance, and the administration side. If you look at the front page, which is on page 30, it explains the scoring system. So risks are scored before and after mitigating actions are taken into account. This report was included every board meeting and once a year at the committee meeting. And I would welcome any input from the board to the risk register in case I've missed anything or if you've got any comments, etc. One new risk has been added to the register, B4, regarding the government's decision that Brunel will not continue as one of the pools going forward. I've scored this as very high initial score due to the potential for the fund to incur high costs in migrating the portfolio to another pool. This may or may not happen, so watch this space. I've also updated B3, which is regarding Brunel, to reflect the higher risk of Brunel staff leaving due to the current situation. There's been a number of updates on mitigations across the register in order to reflect the current position. Just as an aside note, I've recently met with audit colleagues and we're looking at how we present the risk register to the board in future. So it may look a little bit different at the October meeting. So watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Is any questions? Ian.
Yeah, really just to pick up on the risk for the McLeod judgment. I understand there's been a change in the date by which it's expected to be implemented by Peninsula Pensions to next year. I'm just wondering if that's going to affect the reputational risk.
Yes, so the position we're in as administrators, there was the option to extend with a determination, which you quite rightly say we've asked the committee to approve. There are various elements of McLeod that we're currently unable to do. So again, part of the paper that I will talk about in a moment is answering some of the questions and giving further guidance on a couple of the areas that we haven't got guidance on at the moment. So there's that aspect of it. There's also an aspect where transfers, where people have transferred pensions into ourselves. With club transfers, we need to get new figures from other administrators. Again, we haven't got that information from other administrators yet. So there's information that simply we're not going to be able to achieve an August 25 deadline. So what we've done is we have looked at what we can achieve, which will be the pensioner, those that are actually waiting extra monies now, and any survivors or survivors of that pensioner that are due extra monies as well. So the deadline for those is still August 25. Any other recalculations linked with transfers or into funds from other pension funds, again, data that we need to get between ourselves, we'll have the later deadline, which is March 26. And we have a plan in place to achieve that date. just to give you some reassurance, this is the same position with administrators across the whole country. So the information that we're waiting for is the same, whether you're Peninsula Pensions or elsewhere across the country. So reputationally, if it affects us, it affects everybody. But yes, unfortunately, we haven't got all the guidance yet, and also we haven't got all the information around transfers, etc., to be able to do that. So the best and most achievable date is the March 26th date, which is why we asked to use that determination to extend it, which is in the legislation to be able to use.
It's quite an interesting one. It's only come out today, really, in terms of the pooling arrangements, which is very high. And I just go back to the previous agenda item, which was the survey. I'm conscious that we're going out to MPs, etc., to expect them to help lobby against these changes to pooling arrangements. It would be quite powerful for those MPs to have the voice of members. Is there some opportunity to add a question? You have to be careful, I suppose, how it was worded, to that survey around the changes to pooling and what that might mean to the cost of the fund and to members' funds. Maybe not an answer for today, but something maybe to explore. I think we have to be careful about lobbying, but I think our members should have a voice, and the changes to pooling is a significant cost to their pension fund. So perhaps they could have a voice through our survey. It's difficult because I understand most of our members probably won't understand the pooling arrangements.
The only comment that immediately springs to mind is it probably doesn't affect the members per se, because we pay in fixed contribution rates. It probably affects employers, because ultimately the costs are all going to be spread across the employers. So it's more, I would say, an employer issue than a member issue would be my immediate comment.
As an employer representative and employee representative, therefore, any cost to employers has an impact to employees, whether that is strategy to take on staff, whether it's a strategy to retain, strategy to increase wages. So therefore, I think there is an indirect effect to employees if there is a significant cost increase to employers as a result of us having to repool. Thank you.
I think that one of the problems is the timings, because I don't know when the survey is intended to go out, but I'm aware that a decision has to be made by September in relation to the transfer of the fund to another pool. So we might just get caught in that. So it's really the timing issue in there. I'm aware that funds have been encouraged to put something on their website, at their minimum, saying to the scheme members that their pensions or future pensions should not be affected by this arrangement, just to give them that advice, because I know that another place I am getting lots of saying, oh, we're going to lose money, it's going to cost us. And so we need to actually get that message out to the scheme members and the employers, in that sense, saying that at the present time the scheme members pensions or future pensions are not affected. Make sure that happens.
Yeah, sorry, just maybe I missed something. Just on this new pooling arrangement risk, when I looked at the papers, it referred a bit later on in an Appendix 1, which was, I think from memory, the response from the government saying, we don't like Brunel, was that effect. But I don't understand in headline terms why they don't like the current arrangement. But there must be some rationale given in that, which we haven't got, which I haven't got, in that letter, isn't there? They can't just say, we don't like your pooling arrangements. Well, why? Because the return isn't what you're expecting, or what?
members are happy, we can actually address that issue in part. We can actually add an item to the agenda, a part 2 item, to discuss that in full.
Okay.
Alternatively, we do have the training session afterwards. The investment and pension fund members.
Yeah,
It could
yeah.
be discussed
Okay,
then.
understand.
I
Okay.
think it
More
might be
appropriate.
appropriate to later to discuss.
Yeah, just because it was considered at part 2 for the investment and pension fund committee, so I think some of it's a bit sensitive.
That would certainly be helpful too, though, wouldn't it? Because the letter doesn't completely, I mean, the minutes don't completely make sense really without that background.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have seen the letter from the minister, and there are some interesting points in it, which I think we'll discuss at another place. If you're happy with that, members. Yep. Okay. So is there any other issues in relation to the risk register which have come out from your there? No? But I think everything else, there's the cyber security, which always is a concern, which I think we've had various reports over the years on, and in light of recent developments in the commercial industry, we have to be aware. But I'm thinking that the administration are very hot on this. So I did get that. I did enjoy. There was one reference to can be accessed from a non-DCC laptop, and I thought, whose non-DCC laptop?
Yeah, I also crossed my mind because I might be wrong, but this, for instance, this Marks and Sparks one, my understanding is it was accessed through a third party who had access to the website somewhere, I don't know, some supplier. And yeah, reading that, it said something about it's hosted by Logitech or somebody, suggesting that there was, am I talking rubbish? Access, third-party access, and the bell just rang. Are we okay with that? That was all.
So Logotech is a system that my team use, and it used to be I say in-house, as in on the servers at sort of Devon County Council, but we went down the hosted route probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. So we do access it via the web. It is just a database. It doesn't calculate any benefits or anything like that. It holds, there's 2 sides of it, on the county side and the pension fund side. On the pension fund side, it just logs where our overnight cash investments are. So on a daily basis, my team will do the cash, run a report off of Barclays and think, oh, look, I've got 200,000 to pop away overnight tonight. And I will look at Logotech to where I've got room to put it. I will place that investment deal, and I'll update Logotech to reflect the current position. It's just a database of recording where our overnight cash position is. But as it's on a web-based system, what I was referring to in the risk register is that if DCC network went down, I could still access Logotech, not on a non-DCC computer. But the system itself, as I would say, is very low risk. It doesn't hold any money. It doesn't hold sort of any data other than, I've got 25 million stored in Aberdeen. Yeah. No, that doesn't apply to Logotech. It is quite a low risk in terms of cyber security. The high risk, I would say, is more Peninsula Pensions holding all that member data, bank details, etc., etc. Sorry, Rachel.
Yes. So we use Hayward's software, which is used by a lot of the funds across the country. And every year there is testing, basically,
Not payments of
independent
the business
testing.
consumption.
Hayward's Consulting have got Altair software for the pension administration software. So, but yeah, they are very, they do regular tests and they provide us results of those tests from independent, not hackers, but people that are people that are good at that. Yes, thank you. That's the word. They do that each year. And disaster recovery, and also a lot of cyber security testing, and we had an audit on around the cyber security of the system as well. So yes, I mean, as you know, cyber security is a moving target, and they do their best to move with it and protect all the data. But they do give us reassurances regularly on how they're doing that. So as much as they can do, they're doing that.
Could I just ask potentially if you could clarify the mitigation by saying access by the remote control by authorised rather than Joe Public?
You still got to log on and.
I know, but it's just there. So anything else on item 10? Thank you. Item 11, the minutes of the Investment and Pension Fund Committee. Has anybody any questions on there, as we are joined by the chairman of said committee? No? Nobody got anything to raise? Check. No? Okay. Thank you. I'll note that they have been noted. Item 12, internal audit, always the good one.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to keep the board up to speed on internal audit programme. First of all, section 3, you'll see table of outstanding audit actions from previous audits. I can comment on the private market one. This is inputting all the private market transactions into our finance system. You may be aware that we've had a new finance system going live in mid-April, and we are so that has delayed putting on some money market transactions, but we are just about to commence with speed on that one, so that one will be resolved shortly. Section 4 is this year's audit plan, and Rachel and I have been worked with our audit colleagues in order to put these in the calendar so they're planned throughout the year. And last but no means least, attached to the reports are the final audit reports for employer data, local impact portfolio, and McLeod. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody any questions to Charlotte?
Could I just ask Rachel and team if there's just any update on the high risk for the red on page 4 in terms of what's happened there, please?
Yes. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'll let Gareth talk.
Yes. So yeah, Rachel, right. So there's a pensions line went out, which gave an overview of the outcomes. Essentially, didn't go into specific employers, of course, but it gave an overview of the number that were deemed successfully providing information, which was great. It also highlighted there were a couple that didn't provide the information and didn't in fact respond. So yes, we've done that. We've also engaged with the employers and should have already happened. In fact, had meetings with those employers that didn't respond specifically. So there were a couple of issues around data. 5 employers where there was some mismatching, but we need to just sanity check where that's at. And then the 2 prominent ones were the ones that didn't provide any data, the audit team at all. They've all been engaged, time's been set up or has already been held with them to explain the importance of it and to prevent any future issues popping up.
Can I ask, in those people, those bodies we've had issues with, are they sort of at a small level, i.e. parish council, town council level, or are they at academy type level?
I can provide the specifics afterwards, but they weren't tiny, put it that way. One of them that didn't reply was slightly larger. But yeah, I can get the information across after this if you want specifics in terms of size. Employees.
Any other questions? No, can I just have one here? On page 67, pension admin strategy compliance, it says actions outstanding 1 high. How long is that going to be outstanding for?
I believe that's what Gareth was just referring to. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yes, it sounds like
Yes,
it's been
it was.
actioned. Yeah.
Thank you, Gareth. So I'm having trouble because of the noise coming from the other end. It's part difficult out there. And I knew I should have brought the hearing aid. Dominic.
I think it's worth noting, although we concentrate often on some of the negatives here, and we've just talked about the limited assurance on the data quality employer interface. I think it's worth noting that I suspect the board is pleased that we've got substantial assurance across all the other measures.
Thank you for highlighting that. Paper is great, but you've got to flick through lots of it. Item 30, agenda item 13, which LGPS access and fairness consultation.
That's me. Just before we go on to that paper, if you don't mind, I do have the opt-out percentages for member self-service, if you're happy for me to say that now. So we have had around 20% that opted out of online, which equates to around 22,000 members that have opted out. So you're right, it's not a small number that won't be engaged with if it's all done on.
Is that 22,000 this financial year, or over a longer period?
Total membership, live data, hot off the press right now. So 22,531 to be precise. Yeah. So we've got those that have not made an election to opt out all get their information electronically, and they've all been told that. But the actual physical number that have signed up to member self-service is 56,198.
What's our membership in total?
110,666 today.
Sorry, it's more than 20% because you have to assume those that haven't opted into self-service should require a letter as well. Just the fact that they haven't opted out doesn't mean that they shouldn't get a letter, because by definition there's 25,000 people who's in another.
So for this particular exercise, obviously that's a choice of yours. For administration paperwork that goes out, they've all been told very clearly, and they have to be told 3 times, and then it's assumed that it's online. So they have all had that notification.
Sorry, just for clarity then, that let's call it about 25,000 people, they've been written out to 3 times or informed 3 times with 3 different communication methods, and they've not responded. So they're automatically almost enrolled online, but they're not users.
Correct, that's correct, yes.
I still think we probably, if we are going to write out to members who are not self-service, there probably is an assumption, although I'm conscious of cost, because you're talking about sending letters out to 50,000 people, second class stamp being 90p, nearly 90p and all of that. There is a reasonable cost to that, but I can't see how you can segregate those that have opted out and those who are non-users and decide not to send a letter to half of them, if you're going to send a letter to the other half.
Yeah, so with the survey, I'll refer that to Charlie and Mark, but yeah, as I say, with normal administration paperwork, we've followed the legislation on electronic communication.
perhaps as part of the survey, if we do decide, and I'm conscious there is a reasonable cost to that, and which probably needs to be appraised, if we did decide to send out to a survey, a good opportunity to add a line in there about ensuring that they do sign up for member services, because 25,000 of them are currently not using the system, as well as those who've dedicated to opt out. So it might be worth adding to that letter.
Any other comments? Thank
So
you.
it's, yeah, no, it's just slightly wider, but I suppose it raises questions about kind of the strategy for, because obviously it's a balance isn't it, between inclusivity and cost. And it is, I mean, the cost must be quite significant, but I wonder, is there any other strategic approach that you or other pension funds take to try and get people to engage online where they can, appreciating that for some people it's important we provide the alternative, you know, so we don't exclude people?
Yes, yeah. So any annual statements that go out or any additional paperwork that comes from the administration team always highlights member self-service, and if you're not signed up, you can do. The problem is, again, you have to be very careful, because if individuals have chosen to opt out and chosen to have postal, you can't. So we can just mention that it's there, but yeah, that's right, you can't.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to add there, I suppose it's quite difficult because we've got about 60,000 active members who are working and probably get communication through their employers in some capacity, so they're easier to sign up. The remaining members, which are best part of 50,000, lack that internal communication other than how we communicate at the moment. So that it'd be actually quite interesting to see if we're way behind or way out of what I would call industry averages. My gut tells me at 56% take up, that's probably quite good. Yeah. Sorry, not that helps us on the communication with the letter.
Thank you.
Okay, shall I
Sorry,
go on
yeah.
to the paper, or suppose?
Yes, if you'd like to go on to item 13, thank you. Thank you for the intervention.
Okay. So yeah, this paper is just a bit of an overview of a consultation that is actually ending on the 7th of August. At the time that I wrote this paper, we were due to respond to the consultation. That's happened. We have responded now to each area of it. The key areas really are the survivor benefits and death grants. That's all about equalisation and equality. So we are in support of that, because there's been a case with another public sector scheme that's been challenged, and yes, it's basically getting everybody in line and making things fair. So I've got we have no objection to that at all. We're in favour of that. There's also an area on there about the gender pensions gap as opposed to sort of pay gap, and there are some elements in there around buying back absences and extending timescales to make this easier. So I guess generally that there's a lot of maternity leave with ladies, and therefore it's the introduction of different points is to make it simpler and easier for them to be able to buy back service without time constraints, so that it's fairer. So there's a lot of positives in there around that. There's also a requirement, as well as the opt-out reporting, which I mentioned briefly earlier, becoming mandatory, and us having to conform to whatever's decided on reporting there. There's also additional reporting going to be asked around gender pensions gap as well. So that will be something else that we'll be looking at reporting forwards. Again, they're talking about that as part of the valuations, the triennial valuations, and they were looking at including that for the 2025 valuation. So the only comment that I sort of included on that is I'm happy to do that, but 2025 valuation sounds maybe a bit tight with getting information from everybody. So just highlighted that to them. Opt-outs, like I said earlier, happy for the reporting to happen on that and to get the more data. It's just the practicalities of getting that information through from each employer. Not impossible, but obviously we're working at the minute with employers to get data, and it's an additional bit of information that we'll need them to ask. It's also then whether the employee themselves wants to make that information available. They might not wish to, so there'll be a choice on there. There's a couple of other elements in there around forfeiture of pension, and again making that a little bit easier for forfeiture to be applied in certain cases. It's quite restrictive at the minute in the legislation, so again we were supporting that where it's applicable. There's several, I think it's about 5 different areas of McLeod remedy that are going to be clarified. So this is the guidance I was referring to that we need in place to be able to do some of the cases. So there's 5 different areas that will tidy that up. There's information about the lifetime allowance, so around HMRC legislation, and the amount of pension that you can effectively have without exceeding a total limit. That has been abolished, and it sounded good when they said they were going to abolish it because it's quite complicated, but they've actually replaced it with a lump sum allowance. So although they've taken one away, they've replaced it with something else, which will be equally as complicated, I'm sure. So that's in there too. And then there's a general section of, it's a bit of a tidy up of the legislation. So with McLeod being highlighted, with the National Pension Dashboard coming up, there's been a lot of just little areas within the legislation that have needed tidying up and clarifying, making clearer. So they've used this consultation to do that with several different areas. One of them around refunds, another around AVCs, the additional voluntary contribution pots. So in general, as far as administrators are concerned, there will be more project work, if you like, that the team will have to do. So we will need to go back on some of these survivor benefits and recalculate to make sure that they conform to what's being suggested here. There's the additional reporting that we'll need to do, but we in general support all of the changes that are stated in that consultation. And that's it really. Any questions, anybody?
Anybody questions? Can I ask the time scale? The consultation ends soon, I'm assuming.
Yeah, 7th of August.
So it's the projected implementation, because I'm thinking of your workload, particularly the survivors benefits, that area. And where's that in your program?
So I haven't got a definite date of when that's going to be implemented, and I suppose it depends on which bits are definitely agreed, etc., and how quickly they then get specific guidance out around those areas. So some of the areas will involve the Government Actuary Department as well, with some of the calculations and factors. So that is a very difficult one to answer.
Is this primarily, it doesn't require a primary bill, is it a regulations issue? Right, so it's regulations.
Regulations.
Right.
So in theory, the regulations, if it's all approved, will go through sort of reasonably quickly, within up to, well, I'm saying reasonably quickly. We've got the summer gap, haven't we, coming up shortly? So it might not be as reasonably quickly. But then it's what extra guidance is needed relating to that legislation change that takes a little bit of time. But of course, with McLeod, that will be prioritised because everybody knows that we need that data in order to be able to finalise the remedy.
Thank you. Is anybody? Now move to, I think it's you again, agenda item 14.
Yes.
The pensions performance report.
Thank you. Yes. So just as a reminder for those newer, this report and what I'm going to talk about here covers off essentially our performance against the disclosure information regulations in place. So it covers off that. You'll see on the first page, so page 91 of the report itself, the overall performance of Peninsula Pensions last quarter was 95%, so we did 95%, and 97% for higher priority procedures. I'll show you what those are in a moment. Just for fair comparison for those that weren't here, the last meeting it was 90% and 96% respectively. You will see here, just note to say that we've continued to focus on deferred benefits and amalgamations of records in prep for McLeod remedy and dashboard that are coming up. and again, I can talk about that in a second. We've had 6 compliments received in the same period. And then you will see the appendixes 1, 2 and 3, which I will walk you through before coming back to talk about the others in a bit more detail. So if I go to page, just going down now, 94, you will see appendix 1, which covers off, as I say, our performance. Broadly, just to give some context, that it's relatively flat. So increased very marginally, as I said, from 90 to 95% overall, and the high priorities increased slightly on the last performance. We've done more work, I guess, in the same quarter, which is a positive. So there was about 8,500 total cases received last time, so 14,000 this time. So again, just reflective of the work there. Moving down through, as you see medium priority and low priority on the next page. Again, marginal increases on some of these, nothing material from the last quarter, other than in low priority, where we had an increase in the new starters. I referenced in the last pack I talked about. We started electronically capturing that. They will now be reflected in here moving forward. So if you see the low priority cases, new starters are in there. They would have been higher than the last quarter. Have you done that? I pop onto the next page, so page 96. You'll see again a repetition really of the entire year. Broadly flat, as I said, it hasn't changed wildly year on year. That carries through sort of page 97. Again, no standout changes materially in there year on year. 98, so this is where we now move to the sort of line graph that you'll see. Again, nothing massively standing out. The only thing I would say here is low priority, as you'll see, has come up. The other 2 areas, medium and high, have been relatively flat, although trending upwards from the start of the financial year, which is a positive. I won't go through line by line on the next table, other than to say, if you read the very bottom, you will see it's marginal change of 1% variance in terms of adherence. Again, very little sort of quarter to quarter there. Appendix 2 starts on the next page with the line graphs, that being page 99. And again, a couple of call outs here. You will see the spike in the red and green lines, so the completed and created work in January. That is largely the new starters I mentioned earlier on. So the reason it suddenly jumps up is we started electronically capturing those and tasking them. I would expect that to stay higher than the line would have reflected for last year moving forward, because we weren't capturing them. It's not just a January peak, you will see them throughout every month of the year now. So don't be surprised if the next quarter my report shows you higher lines. That's to be expected. Not reflected of anything other than the fact we're now tasking them electronically and they're showing here. That's all that is. The pleasing from there is that the remaining work you'll see continues its downward trend. So that blue line on the same graph in a much better position than it was in April 24. Second graph on that page again is trending downwards, which is a positive. It means there is less work outstanding. To clarify the difference between the two, for those that may or not have seen this, if the bottom line, the reply due line, is work whereby we cannot proceed because we're waiting for information. It could be from an employer, it could be from a member, but essentially we cannot do anything with it. So you'll see that correlates quite nicely with the work outstanding. As and when that information comes back, our work goes up. We clear that. The last couple of graphs on here on the next page, so page 100, and again this just reflects the increase in work. You'll see that from the numbers. If you look in the detail, the level of work quarter to quarter went up, and the level of work completed went up alongside it. So again, standing out there is particularly exciting to call out. If I can just take you back now to the main body of work, which will be on page 92. And I'll just walk you through some of the information and updates here. First being McLeod. Again, as a reminder for those newer members, this is essentially the remedy that's been put in place as a result of the McLeod discrimination judgment to make sure that members are no worse off as a result of the move from final salary to care. It's a direct comparison, essentially. Looks at what you would have received if you were in the old scheme versus what the care provides. If you are worse off, if a member is worse off, they receive the higher amount. That is in summary. You'll see there to date there are just under 4,500 members that have been identified needing review, and they will be checked Doesn't necessarily mean they all need a recalculation. It just means that there may be recalculations needed on their record to rectify that McLeod judgment. The next one on there is the dashboard. And again, for those that aren't familiar, that is in principle going to be a central dashboard for all of an individual's pensions, principally in the UK. If it all works as intended, a member can go on, see any pensions they may have lost over the years through various employments, and they can start to collate their pension records. So that's what that is, very, very simply. We said stage 2, so the update being stage 2 of testing will be undertaken with Hayward's, which is, as Rachel mentioned earlier on, that's our provider, our sort of software. That will have happened in May 2025. And then essentially we want to make sure we can actually comply with the deadline of 31st of October. Doesn't mean it's going to go live 31st of October necessarily. It may be a bit later than that, but there is that kind of deadline in place to make sure everything is working as expected. And there's some data cleansing happening in the background to make sure that what's actually reflected on the dashboard is what should be, rather than any anomalies. Next bit on there is the employer performance reports. And again, so we issued some reports in December 2024. There were some employers with outstanding member data, and they were notified at the time. And it was alluded to earlier on by Charlie about the fact we are delicately nudging employers around the need to give us the data in a timely fashion. And we have done an exercise to clean that up. And again, that will be an ongoing piece of work. It's not something that will stop. But the reports will be going out to show those members. In fact, they've already gone out to the members, employers, should I say, sorry, that have any outstanding cases. So we're currently working on the next batch. What we did last quarter was focusing on anything pre-April 2024. You can see some of that data goes back away. We've tied that up. There were no fines due, thankfully. So all of the employers did provide the information that we were expecting in the timely manner. We're now focusing on everything from April 2024 through to March 25. That's the next kind of round of data. And then from that point onwards, it'll be a quarterly exercise where we're engaging with employers quarter by quarter on any of the outstanding bits of information. That will also reflect then in our ability to meet our SLAs in terms of getting out member estimates and things like that for those pensions that are there. Questions on any of that?
Thank you, Gareth.
Sorry, I've got a handful, and thank you for that. Firstly, just coming on to the employer performance reports, I noted that you've got 4 employers outstanding, which you threatened with a fine. Did they pay the fine, or did they get the data in?
No, so no fines were needed in the end. Essentially, we are trying an approach of clearer engagement, perhaps we'll call it. So there will be a process in place with a very robust set of contact principles. Obviously, we have the usual reporting, so monthly, annual returns, all that sort of stuff, leavers forms, etc. But where we don't get the information, we will be engaging on a monthly basis, broadly on a 3-month cycle, to, in the first instance, let them know how many are outstanding for that period and what the fine would be if it isn't paid. The second instance will be an update. Hopefully, it's gone down. Saying this is what the fine will now be. The last letter or engagement out will effectively be an invoice saying you still haven't done it. Here is what the total cost will be. So that wasn't necessarily in place previously. It's something we've introduced fairly recently. The engagement was there, but we weren't necessarily as robust with the cost. What we noticed very quickly as soon as the numbers went on those emails, the responses came in, which was the expected approach. So we are hoping we don't have to fine anybody. But we're trying to be a bit clearer on what the fine will be if an employer doesn't engage.
I still think that it seems to be working, so I'm wrong. But I still think that fining is totally the wrong strategy, in that I know we haven't had to implement any fines, but if we have, one, if they ain't giving you data, they ain't likely to pay a fine, are they? And yeah, it just doesn't feel right, does it? Finding them money. I understand we need some sort of stick, but anyway, that's by the way, because it seems to be working. So
yes, and I'd probably say the importance of our messaging is not so much on the fine. That's just about transparency of the implications.
yeah,
It's more about making sure member data is up to date, because without it, we can't pay pensions.
Better to persuade than have a stick of a fine. I think.
Yes, yes. And I think what we've seen, so some of that older batch that I referenced, the sort of pre-2024, bearing in mind we're sort of mid-25 now, some of those cases went back 2021, 2019.
Oh, boy.
So this is where employers haven't provided data for years. And it doesn't matter how many times we've engaged with them politely,
Well,
nothing
but there's
comes
some
back.
sort of communication mismatch, isn't there, if it goes back to 21?
And that's why we've put a more robust process in place. So there will be very, very strict monthly communications from my area out. I'm pleased that the very first instance of it, actually we saw it worked. You know, as soon as they realised the implications, and we stressed the importance of it, because as I say, without that information, should one of those members who have left, say 3 years ago, come to us now for a pension, we may not hold the information to pay that pension. And that's what we're trying to stress with employers. It's not necessarily about fining, it's about saying if you don't meet your regulatory requirements, this is the implication. And hopefully we don't have to. That's the ultimate goal, is that we actually just get really good data.
No, I think that's good. That's clear, I thought.
Yeah, thank you. So you know me by now, but you won't, but I tend to look at the numbers for the performance as the employer representative. And it is pleasing that we've gone up to 95% in terms of the performance summary. Just before I come on to that, it's also pleasing, it should be noted that you've added the first column, cases over target, which if you remember from last time I raised, which is the actual human element. If we take the percentages out, that's the actual people, that's the employees that are affected, where we've not met the timeframes. So 95% is really pleasing, but I just wanted to understand that figure a little bit more, getting too technical. But the total cases have jumped by about 7,000. And then I look into high priority, low priority, medium priority. And there are some big jumps in there from previous reporting. Payroll being one, jumped significantly. Amalgamation of records jumped significantly by about 1,100. New starters jumped significantly. And I do know that all of them tend to report higher completion percentages on target, which would naturally raise our overall average.
Yes.
So what's really pleased is 95%. There's some data in here that's not quite like for like from before.
No, very, very fair.
Could you just explain what those large jumps are? Because I wouldn't have expected it in a quarterly period, those sorts of huge numbers.
Yeah, so new starters, I sort of alluded to a bit earlier, was around us tasking electronically new joiners. So they would not have been reflected in the same volume here. That only started in January. So that's why that's a jump up. That will stay now, I'd expect, broadly at that level, assuming recruitment and things like that stay at broadly that level, and you'll see that moving forward. But yes, for this particular one, it is a slight anomaly because it wasn't necessarily at the same level of starters previously. The amalgamations going up can be any number of things, but there's two sort of things that come to my mind. Number one, you have seasonality. So traditionally you have more joiners and leavers at certain times of year. There are certain months of the year that spike, and that can impact it. Secondly, as well, amalgamations, there's a lot of work underway to get records ready for McLeod, and a lot of that may be included in that amalgamation. So getting those records in a position where we can actually calculate any McLeod deficits if it's there. Amalgamations feature largely in that. So it's been referenced a couple of the reports that we are focusing on the deferred records and the amalgamations as well to get them done so that we can process the McLeod rectification calculations. So that's why, largely speaking, they'll be there. I can take it away and look at any other specific lines and give you some more data if needed, but in principle, that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. Just so I understand, and I think the board might want to understand, we're getting lost in the numbers. So we're talking about sort of 7,000 additional sort of cases that you're now measuring. How were they measured before? Because I get the transiency in seasonality perhaps, but not to that level.
The only one that's really new on there would be new starters. The others will have been recorded before. They were absolutely in there. It can just be if there's a particular focus in a quarter on something, it may jump up that quarter. It's not that they weren't recorded, to be very, very clear. The only one that is new on this report to certainly the degree would be the new starters, and that's because they're tasked on the system in the same way a calculation would be now, which is why you'll see them jump in here. The others were always in here. We've just done more in that period, largely amalgamations through a very targeted project to clear them, so we can do the sort of get the records ready. But yeah, that's why they were definitely in there. But
thank you.
Helen, I noticed your hand was up earlier. Is your question been answered?
Very observant, thank you. It hasn't, but I was just, I guess, kind of reflecting on time. And well, now you've asked, just very quickly, on page 98, where we have the table that does variance in performance, can I just clarify my understanding on something, if that's okay? So, for example, under one of the high priority cases, we've got death, and it says period 1, in target 275, 86.5%, period 2, 315, percentage 76.6%. Am I right in understanding that that is the percentage of death claims that we are processing within our target, or not?
So yes, but that essentially for all of those lines would be those cases we're completing within those timeframes. So they will move up and down marginally as you go. If there is a significant spike in one area, then of course the amount we can complete in that timeframe will change. But yes, broadly you are correct.
Okay, so we're saying then essentially that our processing of death claims is getting worse in the time frame, so people are waiting longer?
It's certainly gone down in that quarter, yes. And there can be a number of reasons. Sometimes, it's not always, of course, it can be the complexity of it or our inability to reach people. There's a number of areas, but yes, broadly speaking, you are right. That reflection is worse than it was the previous quarter.
This quarter, just to add, and we've noticed that as well, so don't worry. This is the winter quarter, unfortunately, so it's January to March, and the amount of deaths, unfortunately, during that period do peak each year. So what we are doing in future is we've actually got one of our resources is going to be allocated over that same period going forwards, so that we've got more people working on the cases, because we accept that there is a peak during that time.
But that also,
So I guess,
sorry, Helen, I was just adding to what you're saying. The other standout one is divorce, isn't it? So performance has fallen, if I'm reading it correctly, by 30%. I know numbers wise it's not huge, but were there more divorces in the first quarter then?
That actually could be something different again. I'd have to look definitely, but we have been waiting for further guidance from the actuaries department to be able to do divorces. So we wouldn't have been able to practically do so many because of this pending guidance. So that could be something different. But I can confirm that on those actual cases.
Ellen, you looked as though you had something additional to say.
yeah, so I guess my question was in the context of the things that are the biggest impact for people, really. So I guess, yes, it would be an example of that, that's a significant impact on the people left behind and the time that it then takes to be able to access pension information. I suppose it's just for a board, do we want some more information on this? Because this feels like it's potentially a trend that is not going in the right direction. I accept, Rachel, your point about there being a peak and how we manage those peaks, but I think ultimately we're talking potentially nearly 25% of people not, and I don't know whether the frame is, we're processing those a week later or 10 weeks later or 3 months later. I suppose it's just, I don't know what the context of that risk is, the impact.
Yeah, that's fine. We could look into that further. It's also a tricky area because we can't always do the calculations when we want to be able to do them, because obviously it depends whether there's a will in place, whether there's what delays there are with solicitors. So generally speaking, unfortunately, we're 100% with you on those being priority, hence being in high priority. But sometimes it's just not practically, we're just not able to do it because we're waiting on third parties. And that can be months, sometimes years before that information is finalised, unfortunately.
I guess that's my point. That's my point about what would be useful to have in the report, though. So in the summary, it would be just useful to say where we've got key standout areas like this, what's the kind of narrative about what we think is causing that. So you've supplied some great narrative today, and what's within our control and what's without our control. I just think it helps give us a bit of assurance on, is the risk with us or is it out of our control, really?
Yeah, absolutely. We can include a paragraph to summarise. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, super. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think reputationally, I guess those areas, death and divorce, obviously being very stressful times anyway, can have quite a big impact. I know, for example, teachers' pensions has a very bad reputation at the moment, doesn't it, for dealing with both those issues? I think I'm right in saying certainly divorce, you know, and reputationally that creates an issue for Capita or others running them. At the moment, I know it's changing, but so obviously I guess we want to avoid that, don't we? Clearly. So, yeah.
I think I'd agree with Helen. A bit of narrative would be good, because some of us who's been on the board a bit longer, we've discussed this before, whereas there's things like probate that can hold up. I know we have issues when there's pension on medical grounds, for example, when you waiting on occupational reports. And so we've discussed it a few times. We flagged these numbers, but I think it's really important for some of the newer members, probably not been privy to some of that, to put a bit of narrative in there to explain why we shouldn't be too frightened of 80%. All right, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
And thank you. It's obviously encouraging. You're looking at putting more staff resource in the winter, aren't you? So that's a kind of a good way.
Okay, any other comments, questions? No? Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 15, which I think is Charlotte again.
Yes, so for the new members of the board, I produce this report in order the board's knowledge can be kept up to date and inform the board of developments in the LGPS and the wider pensions arena that may affect the LGPS. Most of today's update relates to the government's response to their Fit for the Future consultation. To start with, the pooling arrangements of the LGPS. The board may recall that there were 8 pools set up after 2015 when pooling was introduced, and the Devon Fund has worked with 9 other Southwest funds to establish Brunel. The government has now decided to reduce the number of pools to 6, and unfortunately Brunel has not been selected. This is extremely disappointing. We have a deadline of the end of September to inform government of which pool we would like to join. Officers have been working with other Brunel funds on what the future may look like. Ultimately, though, it's for each administering authority to make its own decision for its own fund. It may be possible that all Brunel funds move to the same new pool, or we all go in different directions. Officers will be taking a recommendation to the committee in September. So more information on the Fit for Future consultation responses detailed in section 4.2 regarding the investment side. The administering authority retains responsibility for setting investment strategy, but really everything else goes over to the pool. The government wants all assets to be managed by the pool, which would include our current in-house legacy investments and the recently formed local impact portfolio. The Fit for the Future consultation also finally addresses the long-awaited good governance review and puts into place recommendations from this review, which are detailed in sections 4.3 of the report. This includes an independent governance review every 3 years, with a report going to the Secretary of State, who I believe, if they have serious concerns over governance of a fund, could intervene and impose merger of funds. Finally, all the above is being brought into law in the new pensions bill. It's currently going through Parliament. Anybody got any questions?
Any questions? Can I just add, you'll notice on page 102, it refers to Appendix 1, which is the letter from the Minister. Could I ask that actually that is circulated? Yeah. So you were aware, because it came up earlier as to the reasons. Does anyone any other questions? No? Thank you for the report, and it's ever changing, this one, by the day. I did unfortunately catch some discussion of the pensions bill in Parliament, and it was interesting by the lack of number of people there. But the points raised at the time were quite telling. Moving on to the future work programme, item 16. This is a standard report. Anything to?
No, it's only this is our sort of work plan for the board, or any items the board may wish to look at going forwards. Some things on here relate to government consultations, etc. So exact timings are, you know, sort of flexible. But this is the board's opportunity to sort of add anything to the agenda of future items of anything, any areas they wish to review or look into a bit further. Thank you.
Anybody, any comment? No. One thing which came out of a pre-meeting discussion was relating to, we normally have a pre-meeting prior to our board meeting, and its potential to use that for some additional training or a specific review of a particular topic. It might be beneficial to do that. I'm aware that other boards elsewhere use it for that purpose. So if you want an item, so you wanted a, let's say, audit, you want a deep dive into a subject, we could use that for that purpose. So if any suggestions, maybe well.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting idea, because I think we'd had the discussion at the previous online meeting, hadn't we, about how much we needed the pre-meeting. But I mean, I guess obviously occasionally there are issues where it's helpful for the office to be aware of anything in the particular in advance, or the chair, obviously. But I mean, that would mean that if there wasn't anything particularly sensitive, one could have a more meaningful use of the time in some ways. So yeah, that would be helpful, I'd have thought.
I just wanted to observe how useful in-person meetings are. Whilst I went to Trowbridge, it was a hell of a long way to go, but it was very helpful to meet with other board members from other boards, to actually discuss with other board members the way they were dealing with their current issues. And I think it's useful to bear in mind to have in-person meetings. Perhaps we might want to consider have in-person meetings more than once a year. But I just praise that as a learning experience that I had. You can sit in your back bedroom and watch people on the screen, but you don't get the background discussion, which can be quite helpful at times. Thanks.
I think from memory, the reason we went to the prior approach we went was because of 2020, where we were having meetings all remotely, and at the time it was determined that we should have one in-person meeting, which is this one, because it involves the election of the chair, etc. And the fund have also used it as a training event following. It is open to members if they wish to meet in person more regularly. At present, we have 4 meetings a year, 1 in person, which is this one, and 3 others. If you wish to have a further in-person meeting, that is your right to request.
Can I just double check, obviously, because I would have to look into that and make sure we've got rooms. Is there a kind of unanimous support for that? Do people prefer remote, in person? You don't have to answer now, but if you can email me, or if you have any feedback, preference.
Whilst I haven't got a vote, I think it's a sensible idea, and I think there is value in having more than one a year in person.
It's fine. I'll take that offline, and I'll contact everyone. I mean, there is also always the opportunity to join remotely for anyone who couldn't make it. But yeah, I'll take that offline, and I'll update everyone. And it may be that I just ensure we have a room booked for the next meeting or two, and we can. Okay.
It might be sensible to alternate in a way. So because our next meeting, which is on the back of the agenda, is on the 20th of October, which is a virtual meeting. So potentially we might ask for the 3rd of February to become an in-person with, a hybrid meeting. Because it does, as you say, it does allow us to have a discussion, an interchange, and talk around the issues to come up. Anyone has anything else to add or say? No? Can I say thank you for attending, and see you in some way or other on the 20th of October. We have more news in relation to the government's and what's happening in the pools, which I think is a big issue, which we will come back to. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, just